Good afternoon. This panel is attracting new money. I think everybody likes the idea of new money. How local outlets can capture national marketing dollars. I think everybody likes the idea of national dollars too. So this is quite an interesting panel for those of you who are operating your own local publication, website / whatever it is. Our two presenters are Maribeth Papuga and David Card. I think it's pretty obvious that I wasn't involved in this originally. I was kind of pressed into service, but I am going to introduce them. I'm going to introduce Maribeth first because she's going to speak first, and then we're going to let David tell you who he is because I don't have a bio on him. So this, it is a little last minute, but everybody likes improv. Maribeth is a media consultant and serves as executive in residence to BIA Kelsey, a leading advisory firm focused on the local advertising and marketing marketplace. She advises the company and participates in its practice areas, including industry coverage, research, consulting, and forecasting projects related to local media strategy and investment. Papuga has specialized in local market advertising throughout her career. As the former EVP, Managing Director of Local Investment and Activation at MediaVest, she managed a diverse list of national and regional clients and actively supported industry initiatives that elevated important focus on improving local media measurement. More recently, Maribeth has also pursued advanced degree studies in local economic development and creative cities at NYU. She received her journalism degree from the University of Colorado Boulder and is a resident of Westchester County, New York. Please join me in welcoming Maribeth.
Thanks so much. So as Jane explained, most of my background has been on the agency side of the business. So I think what I'm going to do in my presentation is really give you kind of insight as to what national marketers are looking for and what their thinking is and how there is an opportunity, which I will lead on the back end to tell you. I think if we can just start with what the marketplace looks like. BIA Kelsey, what we do is we forecast what the media is going to spend in advertising each year. We do this twice a year, and if we look at the local U.S. media revenues, it's $146 billion. That's a lot. If you also look at how the pie is actually getting split up now, you see that there's about 9 different extensions, which are really digital extensions of what traditional media was. So that's extra competition for those dollars that wasn't there before. And there is a little bit of cannibalization going on because, if we take the TV stations, they've sort of put a website on, but they're playing around with the monetization. But when we look at national marketing, their spending is actually growing. And what BIA Kelsey does is we actually project out 5 years. We do this twice a year, and we do this at a very local, hyper-local level. So what we do is we track every media company, all their expressed revenue, and so we could tell you if we were looking at New York, or if we wanted to get down to Atlantic City, we could actually do that and show against about 19 different categories where the spending's going to be. So what we do is we look forward, and about 36% is coming from national broadcasts. That's a lot of money. We're also seeing the SMB, and BIA Kelsey classifies an SMB as 100 employees or less. It's a little bit different than some measurements, but that's significant. And a lot of that is actually the fact that they're getting involved in digital right now and they're raising their money. Brands are holding their spend in traditional relatively flat, but we see a significant growth, almost a parity when you go into 2020. It'll be about 25 billion in, I'm sorry, my numbers I don't think came out right. It's about 25 billion in digital versus 45 billion in traditional, and that's really not a significant increase versus what you would have seen if it was just a normal course of expression for growth year on year. Where the real growth is coming is mobile and digital, and a lot of that is Google and Facebook. So you have to understand that the smaller local websites aren't really getting that bump. There is a major shift on the national side to really go from what used to be called media and demographic buying to audience buying. So they're saying, instead of me wanting to buy women 25-54 who live in Atlantic City, I want to be able to say, I want to buy, women who have children under 3 who also buy diapers at Costco. And that's how definitive they want to get. So to do that, what they're really seeking is from a national, again, this is a national marketer's viewpoint. They're looking for scalable solutions nationally. They're not looking at every local community coming to them with an offer. What they're saying is, look, I like what you might do in this local market, but how can I scale that? How can I make that a bigger offering for my brands across markets? They want an optimal media mix. That means they want to sort of exercise cost to what their value is in delivering those audiences. Cost efficiency is huge within the national marketing platforms. What they've done now, instead of the marketer deciding the sole budget, what they've done is they've said, you know what, we have a procurement group, and the procurement group who might buy office furniture is also looking at the media expense and saying, how can I validate that this is actually the best investment for the company? And that can be challenging to a lot of people because it really does come down to a national platform sometimes winning out over a local for nothing more than just the way someone computed a cost per thousand. Budget flexibility, I think, is a win for local because they can get on and off quickly, but it doesn't scale. And the trackable advertising guarantees, there's a little bit of that touch today. When we talk about audience data, what we're really talking about is matching that to media. So we're saying, if I want to buy these moms who also buy diapers at Costco, and I place an ad in a newspaper or on a website, I want to be able to track when I run that ad that I'm actually getting that person. And that's been data that Google provides, it's data that Facebook's providing. It isn't data that traditional media is providing, and there's no consistency. So I think there's an opportunity there for the whole industry to come together on that. And trusted verification is the biggest. Factors that are going to influence the national brand media selection is really the acceleration of audience fragmentation across media channels. As I showed you, we've added all these different extensions to traditional media. If you have consumers buying or vying to look at content on each one of those, there is more confusion now with what's my right mix. My marketing budget has stayed the same. How can I actually get the most bang for my buck by aligning with the right channels? Data-driven audience buying is also capturing more of those dollars through Facebook because they can prove it out. And while there is still traditional planning and buying going on where it's against large demographic groups, that substantiation is missing. And so what's happening even at the SMB level is they like trackable advertising even versus the mass market. So they're believing that more. And that really is then bringing forth the targetable media, the optimization of it, and the emergence of new competition. So you have a lot of different players competing for that same national marketing dollar. This is not working. When we look at planning, media planning traditionally, these two, my slides got a little messed up. When we look at it, really what we used to do in traditional was we spent a lot of time analyzing media. We used to look at every media channel, every market. We really came up with a plan that made sense for an advertiser. Today, it's more on optimization. It's more about the clients looking at real time and saying, all right, I want to know if I've reached this audience, how can I best move that money into the right channel and make the right decisions to reach that audience. It is a little bit too hyper-targeted, though, and what national brands are actually developing after 5 years is they're seeing, you know what, maybe we need a mix of some of that traditional and hyper-targeting because maybe we're missing some people. So the media and marketing practices are also changing. We used to know who our competition is. We knew that there was TV served a certain purpose, radio served a certain purpose, newspaper served a certain purpose. Advertising channels were bought on reach and frequency. They weren't necessarily bought on audience deliverables. But we've moved into this progressive media practice now, and that's really telling people that there's a complex truth out there. There's stealth competition. We have Facebook going directly to national marketers and cutting deals and saying, you know what, we have the data and we'll give you hyper-targeted data. Weather Channel was one of the first ones to do that on weather.com because they could get at the zip level. And so marketers saw that as a one-stop shop, that if I go with one of these national platforms and I target locally, I can avoid all local media. But I also don't have enough money. But I think as media platforms advance and evolve, there's also a lot of questions now coming up about fraud and bot fraud. Even Facebook last week had a big controversy around their video views. There's an industry standard by the IAB that said you have to view at least 3 seconds or, you know, it's not valid. And some questions around, I don't know all the details, but there were some questions around Facebook's truth behind what they reported to advertisers. So now everybody's up in arms, saying, oh my God, this is horrible. It'll simmer down, but I think there's an opportunity to say, you know, trust and transparency is actually going to be the next level in this whole migration towards data-driven marketing. So the growing challenges, I think, and the opportunities for local media are really the fact that there is this Facebook, Google, Snapchat, you know, all these national platforms are saying they have a local opportunity for marketers. Marketers know that, so it's still a very strong vertical versus am I looking at the context of a market? So what's really confusing, though, is they're going to national agencies. I worked at one, and they're saying, you know, what's my best laid plan? What should I do? And agencies are building these optimizers, they're building these dashboards, they're using data, they're putting everything in aggregate for a client to say, all right, here's the best plan. But it really doesn't calibrate local because they don't have local data, they don't have the resources to look at local data. So I think that what the opportunity really is for local media companies to come together who know these markets to start working with technology and advancing that whole conversation. The FCC and there's privatization around data, there will be a lot of questions going forward about these big companies like Experian who are selling data to advertisers for a big chunk of money. And there'll be questions, you know, how can I prove that you're not invading someone's privacy locally? I think if there's a structure that we build at a local level and we categorize audiences, so let's use an example of the mothers who buy diapers at Costco. If we really want to characterize that across the country, and I'm P&G and I'm Pampers and I want to, you know, do this. If I knew collectively that audience definition in data was the same across every market, and I could look at that holistically and say, all right, I'm pretty self-assured that if I now go out to the local communities and I can map that data to some hyper-local strategies, and it's only going to cost me, you know, half the money I'm buying nationally, that's going to be a better solution for them. We can't do that today. It's too hard. It takes too long. There isn't any one source. So what I'm really saying about local media is you could be a big local partner to national marketers. They crave, and David will follow up, they really do want to get more involved in local. They just don't have the resources to evaluate every media channel that's out there. The other part of it that's really been missing, and I grew up in the full service agency circle way back in the 80s when I started my career, where we really rolled products out across the country. You had regional retailers, you had things that were very specific to local markets. Localism was just a given back then. You know, you wanted to align with the community. If you were going to roll a product and introduce it, you would refine it to meet the qualifications of what the local community has. What's happened in the last 20 years is really this whole thing within marketing and media agency growth that it's all about the numbers. It's all about the cost of delivery. It's all about getting me, the best plan efficiencies I can so that I can run it through my market mix model and I can say, if I spend X, I'm going to get Y delivery. And so it's all at a national level right now. But what they're hungering for, and what you've seen in your own communities, if you take just the major retailers who've had to close their big boxes over the years, they came in 15, 20 years ago, moved some of the smaller companies out, and now some of those big box stores are closing, which means the communities are left to reevaluate themselves. And why I say there's a voice in local media is it's not being told through the numbers right now because we don't have the research. It's also not being told through any capable means, aside from people like me who actually really believed in local and would have these conversations with national advertisers. But if you can actually articulate what's going on at the local market to say, if we look in the context of, take 10 national marketers. If you just look at their products they sell and you look at what they do on an advertising standpoint, and you say, I think you're missing a niche. I think that you haven't been astute enough to look at the trends in this market. That could actually get their attention enough to say, maybe we should look at this market to put some money in it. They might not put a lot of money in it, but it is a start. Because what they're doing right now is, as Census 2020 is actually going to go into field, and once that data comes out, the U.S. will look very different than what people have been using in their modeling right now. They will see the differences of the Southwest. They will see the differences of the Northeast. They will understand that, perhaps their marketing and their media is out of sync. And so I think that, one of the things I've been rallying around in the industry that I work in, from a media company standpoint, is to say we need to put some structure around data. We need to make local dashboards. We need to come up with a portal that could say, if I want to advertise in New Jersey, let's just use this as an example. It's part of the tri-state. If I want to single out New Jersey and understand the media habits in New Jersey, I have to go to 15 or 20 different sources just to figure out what media outlets there are. It's not an easy fill. It's usually I go to a couple of radio stations, a couple of newspapers, and I make a buy and I say it's done. But maybe that wasn't the smartest move. So I think if there can be a migration and a collaboration that builds maybe a portal, maybe a research site, things that can actually help you also get data on those communities to then articulate a better story and then perhaps sell the advertising in collaboration, because it would be almost like a marketplace configuration where you're not out there by yourself trying to get an audience with a national marketer or a national agency, because that doesn't happen. Any of you have ever tried to find out, even for one client, will you buy my newspaper? It's very, very difficult, because you'll get the runaround at a marketer and then you'll get a runaround at an agency. It doesn't mean they don't care about you. It just means that it's too hard to facilitate, 5,000 different voices who are asking for an evaluation. So in summary, what I really want you to take away from here is, don't lose sight of capitalizing on your own strength and your key assets. What do you do in the community? What is it that makes you special? And what is it that you deliver that's missing in a national media channel, or even something that could be much broader in base? What about local, that's still important to national brands, is that they really do, and David will follow up, they really do know they're missing something. And they have dollars that are not necessarily earmarked for media. They've got dollars that are through their foundations, that they come in the market because they're trying to help those public and private partnerships get off the ground. They're also contributing to some of the local programs through their volunteer. So I think we have a little interference here. So I think that what the next level is, so local is really important. The market level interest is what comes first, though. It can't be the media channel itself. They need to have a reason to advertise in a much more meaningful way in your market, and they need to understand that their national effort is not delivering in that local market. And that's the sweet spot that's missing right now. at national marketing tools and local tools. They don't know what they don't know. They think if I'm buying TV on CNN, I've reached the national, I've reached everybody across the US and I'm getting a certain deliverable. I think what there needs to be is sort of a hybrid solution over time. Data-driven targeting is evolving, it is disruptive, but it's here to stay, and that really means that whole notion of all of those attributes about consumers, and you match it to a media spot. And that's really what marketers at the national level are looking for. And to some extent, local is looking at that too, because they're seeing that the SMBs really like that validation of if I'm on Google or Facebook, I get some sort of metric. But tell your market story and offer intelligence. So this could also be a revenue stream for you. This could be something that collectively you think about. If you can give better intel in a more storytelling fashion to national marketers, maybe you can sell that as a product for people. We can, there are several, the ANA, there's a lot of different outlets in the industry that you could actually solicit this information to, and it would be quite valuable than it just being, one media company comes out with a point of view. Could be to say, we need you guys to understand the economic plan. We need you to understand the development plan. And that's the other thing about this whole market story, offer intelligence. If you look at what your economic development groups are doing right now, they've really gotten back into the local assets and said, we're going to attract business to our market based on what we do well, not based on who we think we need to be. So you're not going to be all things to all marketers, but what is it that you do extremely well? And align that with your story and try to get the data behind it to validate it. What's really been happening right now is everybody's trying to compete with Facebook and Google and say, we're just the same and we can give you all these metrics. And it's falling flat because you can't compete with a gorilla. You have to make a better story. Think about how you can make that national marketer smarter. If you know about local competition that's bubbling up in your market, that might be competing with a fast food outlet or a retailer that's in there, that's intel that they can't get. Right now, they just look at ad dollars. They just look at what's being spent. Those are clear, intelligent opportunities that I think people at the local level should think about developing and really partner across your local market through databases and audience definitions, as I talked about earlier, as well as if you are part of a parent company like Hearst, Express today, what is it that they need to do to help the local story more? I mean, they are still in it for the business and the revenue objective, but they're also in it to develop, new opportunities. And I really do think that getting it right at the bottom and feeding it up is a much better scenario than what's been happening now, which is we're looking at aggregation and we're looking at algorithms that are developed at the national level and then they're retrofitted to a local market. And that's a real problem because that means that just like the Google search or any of those capabilities, they're not necessarily looking at the context of a market to say what's the right algorithm for that market as opposed to we've done it nationally, so we're going to filter it down. So with that, I will turn it over to David. And, I just invite you to go to BIA Kelsey. We have a lot of media information. Could help, too, for any of you guys in the future.
Okay, I lied. I do have some biographical information on David. But first, I realized I never introduced myself. And I think I should take this opportunity to do that. I'm Jane Primerano. I'm the Region 1 Director of the Society of Professional Journalists. Region 1 is the New England states and the Mid-Atlantic, except Pennsylvania is cut in half. Don't ask. And the Society of Professional Journalists is the largest and most broad-based journalism organization. We're the people who, among the people, but the people who led the charge at the White House to yell at Josh English about Obama's insane lack of transparency just recently and did get the FOIA amendment signed. We're the people who bring you an ethics code, which is back on the desk, that is womaned by the lovely Maureen and Doreen. The rhyme was not intentional, and you can pick that up. We are the other side of the business from the business side that this wonderful organization can tell you about. So if you need any help with open records or legal issues or anything, you can call on us. I have my cards. The ladies back there can give you information.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm enjoying the conference quite a bit. I hope you are as well. Hey, I want to do a quick poll before I introduce myself. Play digital media company, so web startup. So it's a good chunk. And then newspapers, other print, TV, radio. So it's a mix of news, and then there's conglomerates that do all that kind of stuff. So there's a mix with a heavy bias towards digital, it sounds like, which is kind of interesting, because I'm going to bring up, I think, some data that will prove some of the points that Maribeth was making as well. That I'm a big fan of advertising marketplaces as well, and I'm not as bearish, I don't think, on the opportunities as we might. It's tough marketplace out there, but I think I've got some reason to be excited, and I'm going to hopefully charge you guys up a little bit with that. And don't take notes. I'll send you my slides if you send me an email. My name's David Card. I'm a 25-year plus research, tech industry, media industry research analyst. I worked at companies like IDC and Jupiter Research and Forrester Research, and nowadays I work for a site that's called Street Fight, streetfightmag.com. Go put it into your phone right now and subscribe to our newsletter, which is also good. And Street Fight Mag is a 21st century media company in that it has the three-legged business model. It has a media business, an events business, which is actually what really pays the bills, and then we're dabbling in some research and premium content. We work with companies like Burrell and Kelsey, sometimes as a curator and sometimes as a competitor. And so I'm the research guy at Street Fight, but Street Fight focuses on hyperlocal technologies and marketing and commerce and startups. So come to our conference next week, in 3 weeks, Street Fight Summit in New York. You'll see those kinds of people in the audience, and that's what we do for a living. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some of the highlights of a survey that we did of national brands and retailers that actually do market locally. So they spend money locally in support of their retail branch offices or their distribution partners or the retailers that sell their stuff. So it's less the P&Gs and Unilevers of the world and more of the maybe corporate headquarters for Ford and GM, banks, a lot of companies that have have co-op dollars that they spend locally on a regional basis or really local basis. So we surveyed a couple hundred of these guys and asked them about their digital plans and their traditional marketing plans as well. And this is some of the things we found out. First of all, of the ones we surveyed, and I think our survey is a pretty good, it's not necessarily statistically significant sampling, but it's a representative and directionally accurate, we believe. We found that a quarter of these big companies spend over 50% of their budgets, of their digital budgets on local marketing. So this is a good thing, and they're also increasing. So another 40% of them said that mix is going to increase. So I'm a digital biased guy, but one of the things I'm going to point out from the survey is that what these guys are looking for is a lot of cross-media campaigns. I think there's opportunities to blend digital and traditional media together, and I'll try to make that point for you and maybe give you a couple of pointers on some things that you might be able to sell to them. So this is what they use to market in support of their local operations. You can see emails right at the top, so there is one digital category that's right at the top, but a lot of other things, social media isn't too far up there, but the other things that they're using, like digital display advertising or paid search or mobile advertising, relatively few of them are actually using that to support their local operations. That's because I think in their minds, a lot of their digital budget goes to supporting the big website, the corporate website. So, but they are getting more into it. And one thing that these guys love, and everybody loves these days, is mobile. And mobile is by its nature local, right? So anything that you're delivering in a mobile fashion, in theory, could be targeted locally. So that is a very good potential opportunity, if Google and Facebook don't get all the local dollars, for media companies to participate in this digital movement from these big brands who spend like a third of all the spending. One of the things we found out about these guys is that they do they're mixed, you know, you're going to have to sell to both headquarters and local operations. So about a third of them control most of their digital budgets in a centralized fashion. But that means there's a lot of input from the regional operations or the local operations. And then this is where I think it gets interesting when we look at what's going on. So, and where the opportunities might be. So we asked these big national to local marketers what was their most effective media in supporting their local operations. And email, again, was right at the top, but really not much else was. Social media is pretty high on the list, but classical digital technologies are pretty low. And in particular, so you've got email, you've got social media, and then you've got a lot of the places where dollars get spent that they feel are less effective. And this is in contrast to probably some of your other customers who are the smaller businesses who list as their most effective media. They've really bought into digital. Most of them love social media and email and search engine optimization. They're really sort of losing faith, I think, in some of the traditional media. So note that contrast. So the big guys may be more sophisticated in theory, but they actually still believe that traditional media is largely more effective in supporting their local branch offices or retail or whatever they're supporting. The other thing that they like to use, Maribeth was talking about audience targeting. Absolutely, that's the big shift in the movement. You don't buy media anymore. You buy an audience, and you have to know a lot about it. And we asked them what they thought was their most effective data source for that, and it's really their own data. It's what they've collected from email addresses and what's in their CRM databases. And this is all a good thing, I suppose, if they've got enough of it. But chances are they don't have that much information on local customers. And as they go mobile, this is going to get worse because the mobile data is just that much harder to track. Mobile devices are harder to track. They haven't collected that kind of stuff yet, chances are. So this is going to this reliance on their first party, their own proprietary data is going to be a bigger problem in the future than it is now. So let's take a look at some of the other things that kind of cheer me up when I think about the opportunities for local media selling to these big guys. Another thing we asked these guys is whether they thought local media and content was important to their digital marketing efforts. And you see that over half of them said it was. And nearly a quarter of them said it was very important. So this is good. So I'm going to show you some slides now coming up that compare those local media fans versus the quarter of them that rated it unimportant. And so you'll see some other things that I think will cheer you up and hopefully give you some pointers on things to programs to work on. So once we looked at what they're spending on, what they're going to, remember that a good bunch of them are going to increase their spending. And in fact, the companies who were fond of local media or thought local media was important for their marketing efforts are bigger, spend more, and are shifting more of their budget locally. So those are all good things. And this is what they're spending on. They're spending primarily on social and email, but they're actually spending pretty broadly across the board. So they're, half of them are increasing their mobile marketing budgets, half of them are building out their websites, which is in contrast to some of the ones that aren't, the ones that are less fans of media. They're interested in digital display. They're even increasing their paid search, which is very tried and true, well understood way of doing marketing. So across the takeaways here, across the board, they're spending more across the digital platforms or media or whatever formats, I guess, if you want to think of them as that. And that lends itself to thinking about the next slide, which is, this is again the same data about what was most effective, but I've compared and contrast the media fans versus the local media fans versus the ones that thought it was less important. And you can see there's some differences here. They like email, but they think local print is their most effective one. They like direct mail, they like local TV, even before they like email. So one of my takeaways from this slide is that this is where there's a lot of cross-media campaign opportunities. Now, whether you can deliver that or just be a part of that, it feels to me like they're looking at it. And it's not just cross-digital. So if you're a digital company, that's good. I mean, you might be able to help and email or something like that. But if you're a traditional, if you've got print assets or TV assets or radio assets, they're probably going to want to think about things that would be where they would sync up a campaign that would work with their social, with their Facebook pages or with their Twitter campaigns or their Snapchat videos if they're doing that. And they're probably not thinking of that locally yet. So I think those are good opportunities. I think there's a big problem in digital display advertising, which they rate as one of their least effective products. And that's probably, if you're a newspaper, that's probably the main digital thing you're selling. So I'm a fan of native, I'm a fan of marketplaces, I'm a big fan of newsletters, which is a great way of getting people's email addresses and understanding them better. And I think sponsored newsletters would be a really good opportunity there. I think I showed you this one already. We also had some about new technologies. What in the near term is your company most interested in things like mobile push or real-time location data, programmatic ad buying across traditional and digital media? If I say programmatic, how many people are pretty familiar with that concept? That's good. Programmatic is, it means anything. Yeah, it means anything. It means buying, data-driven automation buying. And when somebody says they're interested in buying TV programmatically, it's your job to find out what exactly they mean by that, because very little television advertising is sold in a fashion that a digital advertiser or ad network would recognize as programmatic. There's no real-time bidding. There's usually the stuff that's targeted, the TV inventory that's targeted is run by a different group than the stuff that is sold traditionally or is sold through the spot market, where there are a few kinds of marketplaces. So frankly, your mission, if you hear the word programmatic, your mission is to find out what they want. Do they want just low cost? Do they want operational efficiencies? Do they actually want to apply data to their targeting? Which of those things is most important for them? Because I think actually that's a good role for a media company. It's pretty hard for media companies to participate in push offerings and creating real-time location data unless you've got an app or you're going to help them distribute their apps, their mobile apps. And we could talk about apps for hours and hours and hours. That's a very challenging environment to get distribution in. So a couple other points that you could take away to help you service these guys. The kinds of tools they use to manage their digital media campaigns, they're not maybe as sophisticated as you would think, at least not in their local parts. They're not all that many of them are using a digital dashboard across multiple programs. They're all using social media tools because those are free and they come from, if you're doing social media, you can get it free from Facebook or from Hootsuite or whoever you want to do that. They are again, though, they're slightly more, the media fans are more sophisticated, I would say, in terms of the breadth of tools they use for management than the non-media fans. The challenges, we asked them what their hardest thing to do was. It boils down to integration, and they're pretty sophisticated, so they don't call these challenges as difficult as the non-media fan group says. But they boil down to making different marketing technologies work together and understanding overlapping or contradictory data sources. So I'm just echoing, I think, a lot of the stuff that Maribeth said on the need for common data, either sources or metrics or a way of translating the digitalese into gross ratings points, if that's what they think about, or translating video views on Facebook into something that looks like Nielsen ratings. They're baffled by this, and it's going to retard buying if their procurement people can't see if they're doing things efficiently. In contrast to that integration issue, we asked them how comfortable they were or what their style of buying marketing solutions looked like, and they actually like best of breed better than an integrated one-stop shopping. So much as integration was a problem, they think it's worth the effort. So this is probably good news for smaller media companies or for multiple media companies who are trying to get together with new technology suppliers and putting these solutions together. They're willing to bring in, they're even willing to work with startups. 70% of them said they were comfortable working with smaller companies or startups. So integration is a challenge, but they're willing to work on it as long as the solution meets what they're looking for. So I'm going to give you my takeaways, and then I guess we got a little bit of time for questions. One thing is that they're increasing their digital budgets. So these are big national brands, they're retailers, they're financial services companies, banks, they're car companies, they're working with their big dealer groups. They are spending more locally. They're spending a significant amount on digital locally, and they're increasing that budget. So that's probably not a surprise, probably what you've been seeing. But it's encouraging, especially since could be a new revenue source for some of the companies that mostly sell to small businesses. Your mission is to solve their digital ineffectiveness, to help them do that. Because right now they think direct mail is the bee's knees, and they like email too, obviously, because it's so similar, and it gets them an email address. But they're some of the major digital media that anybody uses for marketing is they feel it's not as effective as local print or couponing or radio for that matter. So the idea would be to help them craft these multi-channel campaigns. It's not just multiple digital channels, but if in a perfect world, it would be digital channels that complement the traditional channels as well. So stuff that takes into account inventory that's used on print or television or radio. Again, I'm going to harp on the programmatic. They say they love it. It's a challenge to deliver it. Find out what they mean and kind of move yourself towards that. I think the content, they're so keen on social media, probably as a distribution platform for their own content or for branded content or native content, whatever you want to call it. Back in the day, it used to be sponsorships. It's not really that much different than, native content by any other means, by other name is probably sponsorship. If you can help them create content and distribute it in your platform as well as on their websites and through their social media, that's, I think, a pretty logical thing for you to build out your resources in it. It doesn't necessarily, you can keep church and state walls separate if you want to. I don't think you have to as much as you used to. It depends on what kind of a news organization or information organization you are. I think in any new medium, and digital is still a little new, and mobile is still quite new, and social is still pretty new, we've got to have kind of semi-permeable walls between church and state, I think, for a while till we figure out exactly what works. I'm sure you just think I sold my soul to the devil, but I'm just trying to help. So I think the cross-channel content marketing is a good opportunity. Custom newsletters that you craft for them, or that they, where you give them content that goes into their newsletters is a good one. Private exchanges or marketplaces where a bunch of media companies team up to get a big buy that could be either cover a bigger local region or a national region, but be enough inventory to compete with the big guys. And again, they like best-of-breed partners, and they're not afraid of smaller companies or startups. So I think all these things are kind of good news for you. So good luck with it. Send me email if you want a copy of the slides. Go to streetfightmag.com and read the site every day and sign up for our newsletter. And a shameless plug, exactly. But it's been a pleasure talking to you. And can we take some questions?
If we want to end on time, we have about 2 minutes. Yes.
We didn't start until 1:45.
You're making a face at me, Joe.
We can take one question as long as you don't tell us a story before you ask your question.
Okay, over there. Do we have a portable?
Yeah, I'll be real quick, I promise.
We'll repeat it for the next group.
There we go. Oh, yes.
Hi. What's your best advice to get in front of decision makers? Because what I have is a problem getting in contact with them, and when I do talk to them, it's usually I'll pass the info on to them. What's your best advice to get to the right person? And once I get to the right person, I feel like I can, make the sale.
So I'll answer that. And I lived it because I was on the agency side where the marketer Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I was on the agency side, and people would get phone routed throughout our organization because the marketer had given them. You know, the agency is the one who's usually in charge of all the execution for a national marketer. And sometimes they have co-op dollars, or they have other dollars that are being used by some other small agency, but no one's going to share that information. It's what I said before. I think that you can all go out and try to sell your own product, and you have to keep doing that. But the confusion now with everything that's being put in front of these marketers, not only national marketers, but local marketers, if you think about all the pitches they get every day, it's confusing. So they need to have some context. They need to be able to say, all right, if I have a marketing problem, what is it that I need to solve, and where do you fit into it? So it's almost like you've got to lead them to the market first, and then you can have a pitch, and you need to be in a format that allows them to almost come to you as opposed to forcing you to have to knock on their door all the time. It doesn't exist today, but I think that that's the only way that is really going to get any traction going forward. It's too confusing. There's too many choices out there, and there's too many companies, both at the national level and at the local level, trying to solicit the same solution. And you also know context with how you measure up to if what David says is true, they're only using their first-party data, that's at their site. You don't know what they're looking at. So they may not even have the right information. So with that, I guess, do we have to end now? Is that the problem?
Yeah, we have to end now, and Joe is the bad guy, so if you're mad about that, just blame him.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.